Meeting to order. First up today, we have Tiffany Henry from Economic Development and Becca Scott from Southwest Commission.
I was going to say good morning because it's been one of those days, but good afternoon. So I have put in front of you a packet of information, and I am asking the board to allow us to apply for an Economic Development Administration grant for some engineering to be performed on some county-owned property that's formerly known as the Drexel site. This grant will be to perform extensive engineering that will allow us to identify and definitively determine the highest and best use of this site. The grant application for this is $355,000, and Jackson County is eligible for 80,000 funding, 80% funding under this program, and so that will require a $71,000 match commitment should we be awarded this grant. So, I guess can I scroll? Yep, I can scroll. Okay. So attached, you will see some general description of this property and the scope of this proposal. You'll see there's some civil engineering that is also going to be included, as well as some geotechnical engineering and some flood and levee hydraulic modeling. This site is in the floodplain or the floodway, and so that is part of the challenge of this site. And so we're really hoping that we can utilize these experts to really help us determine what's the highest and best use of this property. We've talked about it for a long time, and so we really need to understand there's been levees that were put on this property a long time ago that were not properly permitted and engineered. And so when they did the flood mapping, they did not recognize those levees. And so we really need to go back and kind of evaluate that. We will also, he's going to pull it up on the, you want me to drive? So we also have the timeline of this is a proposed timeline, start date in January of 2024, and final reporting in December of 2024. And so we're going to pull this. This is the parcel that we are referring to. And you will see from all of this information that is in your packet that the extent of work, it will be extensive, and it will allow us to, accurately determine what we can and cannot do with this property. Being the situation that it is right now, we are limited to the footprint of the building itself, cannot do anything outside of that footprint. And we don't know that is, we want to just dig into that a little bit deeper, because this is good flat property on the opposite end of the county that needs some revitalization, and we want to really thoroughly evaluate this parcel. And Becca Scott from Southwestern Commission, she is on Zoom, and she has helped me with this grant application to this point. And so if there's questions that you have, she and I will do our best to answer any questions that you have.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to chime in here a little bit. This is a piece of property that has been discussed continuously. It's under lease right now with a group that's formed by farmers. It's got limited use. They do utilize the facility itself a little bit, but this property has been looked at for years, and we've tried to find the highest and best use. What has occurred, what I have up on the screen here is that purple right there is the floodway. So when you describe floodway versus floodplain, this little blue right here, if people see, like people build at the beach when they have a house up on stilts, or when they build in the floodplain, they're able to build up above the area. But in the floodway, you're not allowed to build at all. I mean, you have to, if you try to build here, you have to go through extensive engineering to basically show no rise certification, things of that nature, which if you see how much is in the floodway, it would be basically impossible for this facility. So that's where Ms. Henry was saying that the facility itself, because of the current code restriction, you can only operate within the walls of the existing facility itself. When the reality is this is a lot of property and it's flat property that potentially could be used. And again, since I've been here 7 years, every 2 or 3 years, somebody comes up and says, can't we find a better use? Well, this really is an extensive study. What they're going to do, and to give a little history on this property, there's a berm here, okay? And for years, this berm was allowed by the federal government to be considered when considered floodways. And that's the reason this area was not in a floodway. Well, they came back, I don't know what year it is, they came back and reassessed it and disqualified this berm. And when they disqualified this berm, that's basically what put this entire area into the floodway. And people may ask, well, why don't you build? We cannot allow building in this area because the flood program that the county enforces allows everybody in our county to get flood insurance. And so in order for that program to continue, we have to enforce the flood program as dictated by the federal government. And so things of this study is going to be going in and doing borings here to give us, at the end of the day, we're looking for a preliminary engineering report on what's the highest and best use and how to take this property out of the floodway, take into consideration, we do have other studies that there are some potential artifacts located on this site from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. We got to take into consideration all of these items. But at the end of the day, we need to know how much would it cost to fix that berm where it'd be allowable by the federal government. And ultimately, this PDR should give us the cost estimates. Now, this will what I would consider settle this property for us once and for all. This property initially, Commissioner Bryson, I did have a chance to talk to him before this meeting, and he unfortunately is unable to attend today, but I know his constituents looked at fairgrounds. There's just all sorts of potential uses for this property if it was not in the floodway. And so if they come back, if the PER comes back and says, it's affordable cost to fix this, and affordable is a relative term, then maybe with grants and county contribution, maybe we can get this property usable again. But let's just say the PER comes back, and I'm going to throw out a large number. Let's just say it comes back and says it's $8 million or $10 million to fix that berm, then I think, I don't want to speak for the board, but I think at that point, becomes a value judgment. Is that worth investing in this property? And more than likely that would settle these issues permanently. Yes, sir.
How much land is that that's outlined in teal?
It's
27 acres.
27.82 acres.
Oh, so it's a big chunk.
Yes.
Do we own the other properties there? I know.
No, just what's in the teal.
Just what's in the teal.
Yeah, we did end up, see, that's water, that's Tuckasegee Water and Sewer. They have their facility there.
Wastewater
We did own that, but we transferred that. But that ultimately, we could work with them there. We don't, this is separate property, and this is the old
Old Pepsi.
plant. But that is something that, as you can see, is that the economic development arm of the Eastern Band of
Yes.
Cherokee Indians that owns that property. When they bought that property, they're just trying to see what they can use it for. I would see long-term, because there are potential Indian artifacts there, that if we were able to get this property out of the floodway, then I would see long-term uses with this would be obviously with county priorities, but we would involve the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in the conversations and move forward with that. And we would have to continue and evaluate. If I'm not mistaken, it's somewhere in this area. Is that where it was?
It's right in this area.
Right in that area. That there were some potential artifacts and things identified. So we'd have to continue on with those conversations. But the reality is, I think there's a lot of potential out here. That building is very dilapidated. So the reality is the land, the flat land, is what's of value to us.
Click
On the building?
on the lot there.
And so that building, that's about 80,000 square feet. And it has fallen in walls, leaking roofs. It's got some challenges for sure. And I think we just are trying to figure out, it's like what can we do? And so it's more about definitively determining what we can do with it instead of speculation on what we can't do with it.
Is that a private home beside it? Just
This,
to your right on Clearwood Drive.
no, this is not, this is actually, the Oxford, store. That is, I think they use that for storage for their hardware store and right there in Whittier. And then this is all farmland, and this is, where they use for sort of, I'll say packaging, for lack of a better word.
Do we know the height of that levee or berm? Approximate, no. And when the federal government reclassified that floodway, was it, do we know why that was, the berm was too low or not structurally sound, or when they built it,
I mean, everything I've heard has been by mouth, so I don't have an engineering study
Yeah.
why. I mean, there's questions about what material is in that berm, and is the berm, that's the reason we were gonna do borings, and we're gonna go in and prove what that berm exists right now, but that is part of this PER, is to understand what that berm is. And
Was that-
that's
Was that the Army Corps of Engineers that did that?
FEMA.
FEMA.
FEMA, they did it, it was April of 2010 when they redid the maps.
Okay.
So I think ultimately, if we ever want to know what the best and highest use of this property is, we're getting, nothing is guaranteed with EDA, but we're getting positive feedback from EDA that they're willing to partner with us on this in a significant amount. Again, a $355,000 project, we would match $71,000. That money's proposed to come out of the Economic Development Fund, and at this point, I've been, like I say, every couple of years, this conversation pops up for me. If not for the board, it does come to my office, and there's just not, I have not seen a better opportunity than this to invest money out there to see what the highest and best use of that property can be and what it would take to get it to the highest and best use.
Tad, is there a motion to, well, I shouldn't say a motion, is there a consensus that we need to put this up for a vote
next meeting?
at our next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Unfortunately, Chad couldn't be with us today, so we'll be moving on now to other business. Foreclosed property being the first.
I will mention with the solid waste contracts, the contracts, just a reminder to the board, we did go out to bid. We received multiple bids. All that information has been provided to the board. The contracts that we're trying to get in front of you now are basically 3 contracts. There's a 4th one out there, but we're still working on it. If you recall, I'm working on the tire contract. But if you recall, we're looking now to transport our garbage to, excuse me, to Haywood County, to that landfill that's operated by Republic Services. We are still looking to continue with our same transportation provider. That would be the 2nd contract. And the 3rd contract would be continuation with Republic for our SRCs. All those, you recall, the bids were submitted to you. You've seen the bids. We're just putting it in contract form. And so if it's okay with the board, I'm just going to go ahead and put this on any upcoming regular session that we have, so you can review and us can move forward. Foreclosed property, you do have it taxed. Before I talk about the initial bid, I'm going to scroll down to the last page. These are the foreclosed properties we have on the book at this point. The property that we are discussing is the highlighted one here. You can see the assessed value of $18,430. The total amount of money we have in this property is $2,600 when we foreclosed on it. And we've actually held this property since 2016. If you recall, you currently have a policy when we foreclose on property, we will not entertain any bids until any bids that are less than the amount of money that we have invested in the property until a minimum of a year after we've taken ownership of the property. This does meet the guidelines. And so I'll scroll back up. We have received a bid for this property of $275. There's also another note that we changed a little bit. If you see this last sentence, I think it's the last sentence. This last sentence here, I will pay the balance. No, that's not it.
Is that right above it, the deed?
Yeah, that right there, request the county executive prepare a non-mortgage deed and the following names. They will be responsible for the expenses. We've got this worked out with the Radnauer Goss, who actually they're one of their attorneys handles all of our foreclosures. This is a non-warranty deed, so they will charge us $300 to actually put that deed together. This individual has agreed to pay those costs also. So, and then ultimately, if the board chose to move forward to accept this offer, what that would do is put it in an upset bid process. The upset bid process would advertise this in the paper, allow somebody else to come in. They would have to come in with a higher bid, and the process would continue until finally nobody upsets the prior bid, and then ultimately the land would be sold. You can see, I did pull up on the map, just to make sure everybody knows where this is. Yeah, that's it. Cabbage Grove, 107, driving up. All right, yeah. Let me turn that flood date off. So there's the property. It's before you get to the curve there. It's to the right. One of the things to note on this property, it's kind of interesting that when you do pull in the contour there, yeah, those are 4-foot contours. So you can see that pretty much just drops off the side of the road, pretty much just drops off to the river there. Other than that, I really have no other information. I'll be turning over to the board to see if there's any questions.
Do we have any information on the follow-on contract for 107 that they're expanding, going up through there?
Oh, that has been taken off the tip, and it would be a while. It's not even in the transportation improvement plan, so it's not on the radar to actually.
I just didn't know.
Now, I did mention to Commissioner Jones for the meeting started that if you chose not to move forward with that offer, then the other question would be, is the DOT interested in it? The reality is they may not need it now, but if there was ever a failure in that curve or anything,
That's one of the spots where you see a lot of
Cars.
yeah. I mean it's guardrail, but not far from there where you turn up Pilot Mountain is really close to the edge of the road. And I don't know what you'd build in that little triangle, but
And there's no access.
Right.
The road access.
Yeah.
And there might be a little bit of flat property along the west fork of the river.
Yeah.
But that you could put a little, if you could access it, there might be some use, recreational use for it. Looking at the tax value, it'd be $70 a year coming in that we don't have $70 a year now. But I see that $375 or $275 plus the closing cost, deed work, $600. And there, I know we have some issues, not issues. We've been working with DOT on property exchanges, and we've got some that's forthcoming. And this, who knows, maybe it might be worth a carrot to them to get something else that was usable for our recreation greenway.
I agree. Number one, I just think that's, even though it's pretty much unbuildable, it's still pretty low.
low value.
It's $18,000 value,
Yeah.
assessed value.
so this, just to show you, this is the reason I had the flood data on it. So this shows you, the topo shows you the steep decline right there. But in order for that to be in the flood, either way or plain, it has to be fairly
You
level.
turn the topo on with the flood.
Yep, the topo on. I have to back off. You can see how it kind of spreads out a little bit there.
So that only flat spot right down there at the very bottom. Looks
Yeah.
like it's right on the edge of the flood, so.
Yeah, so you can see the red is generally right at the river, right at the property line, but there may be a little bit. I mean, it's not the problem is the access. So,
Across the river, there are some lots, and there is a road going to the other side of the river, but it does not border this property. There's property between that I call it the West Fork Bend Road. And then the Cullowhee Forest Road is on up at Cabbage Curve, that steep curve, so it doesn't go anywhere close to that property,
There it is off the.
opposite direction.
Is there any need to not sell it to this person for $275?
Well,
Start get it back on the tax roll if the
well,
DOT
like-
wants it.
Like
maybe.
Mark said, just as a bargaining chip with DOT, if we
Yeah.
wanna do a property swap, that seems like that value is more than $275 if DOT wants it for repair.
$70 a year and
Yeah,
at
that's-
38 per hundred,
That's,
what, it's taxpayers' money that we could put to use, but is there a better use for it with DOT?
right, that's what I think, it's probably better used as a bargaining DOT.
So for now, we're not going to accept this bid.
okay. So, I mean, there's no action, just ultimately consensus from the board. I'll go back, let the individual know that the board is not willing to accept the bid because the action requested is to accept. If you chose to move forward, you would put this on the agenda and you would vote to accept the bid and start the accept bid process. But at this point, you're choosing not to do so?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And so let me take this a little bit further. If you all want me to discuss this with DOT, I may just temporarily, either I can leave it on the list for people to submit bids, or I could just temporarily take it off until we understand if there's a DOT
Interest.
interest. Otherwise, people may try to call us again. And so if we don't get any interest from DOT and things of that nature, then we can put this back on the list. And as you can see, it's not a very large list in regards to how many properties we have available for sale. Okay.
Moving on to our Fontana Regional Library Board agreement.
Yes, sir. This is really just a follow-up from the last presentation made to the board, the letter from the county managers. At that point, Commissioner Smith had wanted to just review and go back and do some research. And I'm here for to answer any questions. I do have available the lease or anything of that nature. I'm not quite sure where the conversation is going to go, so I just turn it over to the board for the general discussions.
I did have a discussion with two members of the Board of Commissioners down in Macon County. And they notified FRL back in December that they were gonna review the entire contract, the MOU with FRL, and they're still in that process. And, I can't speak for them, but, the letter that the county managers, while it's a start, they're not ready to go forward on that route either. And they seem to indicate that they would have a new contract that they would present to the other counties to look at and discuss either next month or November. So, I'm not, I personally don't think this has enough teeth either. I mean, it still doesn't do much for us from where we're at right now. And I have another meeting with them. I don't know if Mark's gonna attend or not, next month. So that hasn't been scheduled yet. But, the Swain commissioners, two commissioners from Swain will also be there. Or, one of you guys would like to substitute for Mark or me or whatever. And I've asked Don to set up maybe a group meeting between all county commissioners, so it's official and,
I think that's where we need to look at what's allowed and what isn't. I know, obviously we can't have three people in the room at the
Right.
same time. But if we're creating a committee that's discussing a contract, is that legal? That's my biggest concern is we're bringing in two individuals from each county to discuss an entity, and I don't want to be ethically
Well,
incorrect on those.
Macon has a lawyer involved, so.
I'm here if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, all right, Deborah. All right,
So,
big
So-
question. So there's private discussions between boards regarding the contract with Fontana Regional Library and
Right.
changes that may be made there. If these are privately held conversations, are we, I guess, creating fault or?
Sure, I understand what you're asking. And I would explain it this way. As long as there is no formal committee that exists as far as having two representatives from each board, then, and I'm assuming with the other two counties, they have at least 5 commissioners. That is correct?
correct.
Okay. As long as that doesn't exist as a public body, 2, 2, and 2, and there isn't a majority of the representation from the Fontana Regional Library Regional Board, then that is perfectly permissible because you don't have a majority. They can discuss, but they can't make any decisions because they're not a formal body. All they can do is have a discussion and then come back to the formal board at an open meeting to have that conversation in public
That's-
with a full board.
That's basically the way we've been. It was an informal meeting. And we just discussed, they basically said, we've been working on this agreement for 5 months. That's where we left it. They did not provide me with a copy of the contract or that they've been working on or anything like that. And they did not want to share that until they had it ready to share with all the counties officially. So,
And they just meet once a month, Macon County.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Swing is the same way. They only meet once a month. Yeah.
So this could take a couple of months.
Right.
It could, yeah, it could be
before.
December, January. And the way it's explained it to me, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, there's no time frame that says you have to review the contract within this period of time. When it comes up for renewal, all you have to do is notify Montana that you're reviewing the contract. And according to them, I don't know, according to them, they said that was done officially. And so they've been reviewing the contract internally at Macon County. So
In my past meetings, this contract needs to be reviewed every 10 years, and it's been close to 12.
It ran out in December, the contract.
it ran out in December of last year, which is when they were notified. But there's no time limit on how long it takes to review the contract in the contract. I don't know if that's something legally that's not in the contract that has to be done.
Is there like a month by month kind of we maintain as we go?
It's auto reviewing unless they're
Right.
notified that it's been reviewed. So I don't know what the legal ramifications are of that.
So I think at some point, whether it be this side meeting, with a couple of commissioners, what I'm not clear on is who's representing who. And at some point, this group has to decide what you want to do as a county. So traditionally speaking, and I'm not saying this is how it has to be done, if you form committees, which form committees becomes public and things of that nature, right now, there is no formal appointment of anybody coming to this meeting. But at some point, this group would have to come up with what you're attempting to accomplish in regards to how else would you, as a county, portray to the other counties what you agree to or don't agree to, or what you're attempting to accomplish or not accomplish. So I think ultimately right now, if there's not official appointments of 2, 2, and 2, then I guess just the 2 people that are interested, commissioners that are interested that are showing up, but then it's being done, and that's, I can say here, it's being done without, there, at some point, this group, this board, has to decide what you're attempting to accomplish.
And I'm happy to step out and let any other 2 commissioners that wants to attend that meeting or the meetings as they're scheduled to do so.
And I'm not saying stop the meeting, I'm saying at some point, this board has to, this board has to decide what is actually attempting to be accomplished.
I'm just saying, I was invited, and I think
Yeah.
Mark was invited, he wasn't able to show up, so I should just relaying what was discussed.
Okay, so at this point, I think, maybe we create a set of goals and objectives for our next contract, and then see if the other counties are in agreement with those goals and objectives, and at that point, we can.
Well, Megan's already working on, so we need to at least present that to them, and say, hey, if you're working on this, this is what we want, so.
Okay.
The other thing I would just interject, and what you've suggested, I think makes very good sense. If you were to formally vote on 2 of you to be on that committee with the other 2 counties, you have now officially formed a subcommittee, and a subcommittee is subject to the open meetings law.
Right.
Yep.
So your approach is a good one, I think.
Okay. Any other discussions on FRL? Going forward with our general discussions, human services consolidation.
So again, this is really put in here for, general, if there's any questions or general discussions in the board in regards to this. I am prepared here to provide additional information. Again, since I haven't gotten any individual questions and things of that nature, I'm turning it over to you. What has occurred is there has been an advertisement in the paper for a public hearing to take place the first meeting of October. The advertisement and I think I forwarded it to everybody, the advertisement was really broad in scope, which basically allowed for, let me do something real quick. All options. I can find it real quick. Nope, I don't have it in here. I'd have to go back to the previous meeting. Under the law, the enabling law to allow you to consolidate, it was very broad in scope to allow for all options to be considered. And just a reminder to the board, you're looking at the 4 options, the one to do nothing, the one to basically abolish the existing 2 boards and become those boards individually. So you become the Health Department Board and then the Social Services Board. The other option is to create a consolidated human services agency and then create an agency board. And the first option under that option would be to appoint a separate board. And so that's really technically option 3. And the 4th option there would be you become the Consolidated Human Services Agency Board. So I'm just summarizing real quickly what has been presented to the board, and I'll turn it over to the board for discussion. If there's any questions, discussions.
Any questions from the board?
No, just to clarify, on option 3.
Yes, sir.
We become those boards, but then we appoint a council that actually advises on a health facility.
Yeah, in any scenario in which you would take control of the Health Department Board, it requires you to appoint an advisory board. Now, the advisory board would have similar requirements of the existing health department board, meaning like an engineer, veterinarian, things of that nature. But that doesn't limit you from putting on also social, people with social services experience and things of that nature.
I've had 5 to 6 people approach me, and all were against it. 2 of them, I think maybe a third, but 2 of them were employees of other agencies. I have had 0 email or text me or call me for consolidation. So just for what that's worth. And we know that the DSS is currently, Jackson County DSS is currently under a lot of stress with the foster child care needs in our county. And we are actually housing foster children at the DSS building and having to do 24/7 individuals to watch these children of various ages. And so we even as a board 2 months ago increased the pay for these DSS. They get comp time and an hourly rate. They didn't get the hourly rate, they just got the comp time. And then we even opened it up to eligible county employees who meet the requirements to also participate in the foster care program at the DSS building, and maybe even foster care at their own residences. But so we know the DSS, and then this is what an employee told me from DSS. Well, now we've got all this stress with the foster care component and our normal job duties, responsibilities. We've got to deal with the what ifs is going to happen to them and their roles at the DSS as we move forward on potential consolidation. And I've yet seen, I go back to, I've said this before, but I go back and say this consolidation concept, and I believe in a conversation I had with Commissioner Stribling earlier, there's about 32 counties out of 100 that do consolidation or have consolidation, which is a third. And there's a reason why. Most of those were municipalities or counties with 100,000 or more population, which does have some financial cost savings benefit. I've not yet seen a cost savings, and maybe it's out there. I don't want to have this discussion so we can, if y'all know something, you can educate me. And then you've got, there's 5 people on the DSS board, directors. We appoint 2 of those. We've never appointed ourselves, in my knowledge, to be on the DSS board, but we could. And if there was an issue with DSS, and policy issue, when those 2 appointments come up, 2 of us appoint ourselves to go to that, be on that board. We can then sway policy if that is the issue. Then with the health department, Commissioner Stribling's on that board. That's one of us, we can go to those meetings. One of us we take turns going and then share our positions at that meeting with the DSS. I'm sure Commissioner Stribling could get us a speaking moment to the Board of Health. So that's an avenue too. We've never participated in that level. I was on the Board of Health for 10 years, and they never had a second commissioner come in to offer opinions. And if it comes down to it, some of these options put a lot of power into our hands, and the DSS and health departments have such sensitive information. I don't know if I want to be part of that structured area where, we're a small county. And by the way, drug testing is done already by the Board of Health, except for county employees, which makes total sense because there could be some conflicts there. So we can't really save money by contracting out because we already do it in-house with the exception of county employees. And then last but not least, if it's a non-structured concern that we as commissioners have, then let's address the billboard, Facebook, website concerns that might be floating out there that I've heard some component of this movement to consolidate. And I still stand to and really implore the other commissioners to really think this through, because these actions are very significant and to a lot of people in our county.
And then I'd like to chime in if I could, because I was at the meeting on the 29th, and there's a lot of people in the county that are scared to death. And I was asked, what kind of medical background do you have? I have
It's-
none,
Well, I mean,
zero.
That's why we appointed the Health Advisory Council.
Okay,
It's
but
not
the
that
thing
we're
is, see,
making
they
medical
tried, we tried,
answers.
we tried this once in 2018. And the whole goal on this was to be a one-stop shop, and it was an absolute flop.
What do you mean one-stop shop?
Consolidating both these into one stop.
Creating a board that's going to,
No, the Board of Commissioners for Jackson County in 2018 tried this already, and it failed miserably.
was it implemented the way we're implementing it?
That I
They
don't
tried
know,
to take the two
but,
boards.
you know,
Right.
the thing is here is they're concerned about the department losing control of their board to uninformed people like myself. Like I say, I don't know anything about health or mental, departments or anything like that, you know? You got, I guess, what did she say? Said 32 out of 100 counties has implemented this, and it's not working good with them, and everybody disagrees with this. Somebody even said possibly think about doing a 1 cent tax increase to elevate some low pay to get more people, because like Commissioner Jones said, there's 87 foster kids in there. These people are getting paid horrible salaries, and there's like 2 appointments to watch 87 kids. So, I mean, I just, their whole thing is it's running smooth right now. So the whole thing is if it's not broke, what are you trying to fix?
They being the Board of Health. Is that,
Yes. Just leave it the way it is.
The question I have is, well, let me say this. HIPAA prevents personal data being shared with us. We're not going in and saying, okay, I need information on XYZ patient. That's against the law. We're not doing it. We're not cutting anybody's pay. We're not removing any employees. We're gaining employees. That's what we're hoping to do. We want to expand the amount of people so that 2 people are not watching 87 kids. In order for us to accomplish this goal, we have to figure out a way to get there. This is a part of that process. Whether it's needed or not, we can create a more streamlined effect to that end goal of providing services for everyone. I don't care about what billboards are or not being shown or Facebook posts. The goal is expand services so that we can better serve our community. The appointments to the board are only going to be based on what we are giving or based on what the state requires us to do. So instead of having 2 boards serving 2 purposes, we're having 1 board serve 2 purposes. Is that the fear that now an advisory board is reporting back to the citizens so that maybe they get more DSS people, or I mean, what is the fear from the 6 people you've talked to versus the 180 that work there?
And I talked to Chris, who is over DSS, and that was his concern, you know, who's gonna lose their job, you know,
Right.
is, you know, are we gonna have one director that's over both agencies, or, you know, how's it gonna be restructured? And, you know, once I relate to him, you know, no, there's no plans to take, you know, you or the health director out of the picture. They'll still be there. They'll still be doing exactly what they're doing. They'll just have, you know, another director that sits between them and the county. And basically, they're gonna be able to be more flexible with salaries and stuff like, how many openings do we have at the health department and DSS now that we can't fill because our salary scale is too low because we have to follow the state scale? We have more flexibility to manipulate the numbers that we're paying, and, you know, what we're setting the salary for certain positions to get people in there. And that's where we're really lacking. And
We lose competitiveness
It's
because
not-
we're left on a state scale.
it's not just for large counties, Swain County's consolidated, Haywood County's consolidated, Macon County, they're in discussions to target consolidated. It, you know,
And how many times have we had a board that's sat with a vacancy for months? We don't have a whole list of people that are willing to volunteer. I mean, that's kind of my biggest concern is, with having to do 2 boards, we're now having to fill double the spots.
And there's different requirements for both boards.
Right.
Professional requirements. Mr. Adams, do we control the pay scale for the DSS, the commissioners?
So we do as it falls within the State Human Resources Act. And so there are requirements, separation requirements, that does not allow us to target certain areas without impacting the whole system. And so I would give, for example, animal control. For example, when they've started to hire some individuals for the animal control officer, but there are required separations between the animal control officer and the lead officer and the supervisor. And so if we chose to try to move under the current system, if we chose to try to target those animal control officers and bump them up a grade or 2, it would have caused the lead officer and the supervisor, it would have basically caused everyone in that department to get a raise. And so that, it's not always an issue. The reason I have required separations at the state level is it just falls within the organizational structure and the separation requirements. And there may be a different term. Is there a different term to separation requirements? What is it called? It's the
allocation between the positions.
positions. And so the reality is that that does limit. So the example to target foster care social workers, depending on how you attempted to do it, it could impact not necessarily the whole system, but that area of operation. So I can tell you the pay scale. So yes, we control the pay scale as long as it fits their rules. Okay, so now there is another thing that's been thrown out there. I think we need to discuss this real quick. I don't want to take us too long, but there is a phrase that's being used, substantially equivalent. So if that's the reason, then we have an option to stay as is, but then ultimately we can go in and change certain portions where we exclude ourselves from the State Human Resources Act, as long as it's substantially equivalent. Now, ultimately, this is something that I did send out to everybody, and it's not as simple as it may be presented. I recommend that if that's being discussed with you, well, that's the problem, we need to do substantially equivalent and just move in. I recommend that you go back and read this document. We can go into more detail, but literally go in and start talking about and understanding what substantially equivalent. You got to be reviewed every year. You got to go through, get approval. It's not, excuse me, it's not as simple as maybe sound. Now, it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's not as simplistic as just pulling themselves out of the state pay scale and saying you're substantially equivalent. You have to go through a process. I can tell you also,
and if we decided in the middle of the year we needed, we had positions we couldn't fill, and we wanted to move those, then we'd have to go through
the substantially equivalent approval of the state. So I do want to point out something else too, that what does compliance with federal merit personnel standards require? Because a lot of the conversation is, if we move to the county personnel policy, does it meet federal standards? And then the argument would be to stay with the State Human Resources Act because it does meet the federal standards. Because it is very real. We have to meet those federal standards because we get a significant amount of monies from the federal government in regards to social services and potential health. I just wanted to point out in this document that I sent everybody, this list of standards. The State Human Resources Act actually goes above the federal required standards. Okay, and so the reality is that if we're in discussions and we go down the line of, well, we better make sure we maintain federal standards. All I'm trying to do is provide the information to everybody of what the federal standards are, and the federal standards are literally on page 5 of what's been sent out. And just so everybody understands, this is a blog from the School of Government, Personnel Decisions, Consolidated Human Services Agencies. And so ultimately, and just so you know, my goal is not here to go for or against. I want to make sure the correct information is being discussed. And the federal standards are this: recruiting, selecting, advancing employees as the basis of their ability, knowledge, skills, open consideration of qualified applicants for initial appointment, providing equitable and adequate compensation, training employees as needed to ensure high quality performance, retaining employees on the basis of the adequacy of their performance, correcting inadequate performances, and separating employees whose inadequate performances cannot be corrected. So I want to point that out. That's a standard that has to be maintained. Okay, and in our current personnel policy, we do have in the county's personnel policy, we have a full set of standards that are disciplinary standards that pretty much match what we're talking about. The next is assuring fair treatment of applicants and employees in all aspects of personnel administration without regard to race, color, religion. That's EOC standards. So that is fairly a standard conversation most counties do. And then assuring that employees are protected against coercion of partisan political purposes and are prohibited from using their official authority for purposes of interfering with or affecting the results of the election or nomination for office. And just so you know, our current personnel policy addresses that too. Now, I'm not saying our current personnel policy matches all of this exactly. There would have to be review to make sure that we comply with the federal standards. But I just want to make sure that we don't confuse the State Human Resources Act requirements, which is state policies, with the federal mandates that are being discussed that we're required to follow in order to maintain our federal reimbursements. So just understand they're not the same. I just showed you what the federal mandates are. The State Human Resources Act has additional requirements above and beyond this.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, if we choose whatever option has the, both directors keep their job and keep the same pay, and then we hire a person to be over both areas, have we not created another level of cost to the county? And I've always been on the impression that if that is the case, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that particular option, I'd rather see that money go to the foot soldiers, the health inspectors, the DSS foster care workers, the animal control, as opposed to another layer of upper echelon government.
Well, I mean, if I understand it correctly, we don't have to have a health and human services director. They could report directly to Don, which wouldn't increase the cost. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to go back to the
Maybe you might know that.
when you look at the three options. I think that would have to be clarified. But when I go back to the three options here, ultimately everything I read goes into the Board of Commissioners, where you appoint, the manager appoints a CHS director with advice and consent of the CHS board. I've seen that director's position be an assistant county manager. Okay. I'm not sure if I've seen a combined county manager and CHS director position. That actually was researched a little bit previously. I just don't want to speak out of turn because I've got some research data somewhere because this is the third or fourth time this has been a conversation for the county, and so I think that would be something we would want our attorney to confirm or not confirm that it could be the same person.
I know Haywood County, they did away with their directors, and our Dub, he's the consolidated services director. But, you know, from my conversations with Mark and the others, that wasn't the option that we were, choosing.
No.
And that's the same conversation I had with Chris. That's, we're not doing away with those positions. So
And previously, the previous time this was attempted, it was actually attempted with a second. Okay. And I want everybody to understand the history that happened with that. The board chose to, my job as county manager is to follow through with the desire of the board at the time. Okay. That's the job of the county manager. And so ultimately, what option was picked was option two, actually. Board of Commissioners appointed a Consolidated Human Services Board, which oversaw the Consolidated Human Services Agency. BOC creates the CHSA and appoints the CSH Board. When you go that option, you have to take recommendations from the two existing boards. So you can't go out and just pick somebody randomly. You have to take recommendations from the two existing boards. The new board back in 2018 actually consisted mainly of at the time, the existing health department board and DSS board. They chose to participate. And so at the time, the county did go through, create job descriptions. So the intentions were to have a CHS director that would oversee the two DSS director and the health director. A job description was created. I still have that job description. Cost was created, all of that. And at that point, when we were trying to work with the newly formed CHSA board, that board would not move forward because what happens when this director gets hired, as you can see, it can only be hired with the advice and consent of the CHS board. And at the time, that board would not move forward with the hiring process of a CHS director. That is something, if you go back and look at the minutes, I stood right here, different podium, right here, older podium right here, and basically told the board we were not able to move forward with the process. I think it was well known because it was close to an election, and I, I support everybody's individual right to participate in politics, however they choose to do so. But at that point, it was well known, and it was known that everything wanted to be delayed. It was commonly being stated, why would we hire a director? It's going to be switched back. That's all openly being discussed. And so at that point, it could not move forward. And so everything was delayed until the election. The election occurred, the majority of the board changed, and the majority of the board that came in, I'm assuming their constituents did not want the change, and then ultimately switched back. And that's what happened before. I'm not saying this good or bad. I'm just telling you the process happened. I had a board that went through with this, created a separate board. That separate board did not follow through with the hiring of the director or giving me consent to hire the director, held off until the next election. New board members were seated and changed back. That's what happened.
Maybe it would be helpful. um, I think it's clear in my position, option four.
Right.
But what's unclear from a public standpoint, and that might have been, go back to your question on what are those 5 or 6 people, what was their concerns?
Right.
What options are we as a 5 board looking at? And so that can be, maybe we have now until next Tuesday to think about it and come back out and be able to express that interest of what
Right.
option. So the public hearing in October 5th, I believe, they have something to
Research
Yeah.
and kind of.
Yeah.
It is not my intent for anyone to lose their job.
Right.
Never has been. I think we need the flexibility with salaries to put people in these positions that we cannot fill. And we're losing people to other counties that can manipulate their salaries. We've lost some to Swain, we've lost some to Haywood.
But
Because
even in private practice.
even private practice, because we can't pay them enough to stay. And like DSS, they're having to stay, 24/7 with those kids. That burns you out. A little money helps, but we don't have the personnel that can do that without causing burnout. And
Money doesn't replace time. And that's the biggest thing.
like, yeah, and DSS, they have these standards. You have to have, this many workers for the cases. They can only carry X, or they should carry X amount of cases. And then you have to have a supervisor for X number of workers. Well, if their caseload isn't heavy, even though they're spending 24/7 watching 3, 4 kids or whatever, well, that doesn't give them any extra room to hire new people because their caseload is below what the state considers normal. So under the, the county, we could, as a board, we could approve those positions regardless of what the state standards are to increase the number of people there. And I know that costs money, but is money really a concern when we're burning out people and losing talent that could stay here?
The Commissioner Strickland mentioned it earlier, 1 penny of a tax increase, which we had the second lowest tax rate in the state. I think still the second. I know maybe
It may change because there's some,
we may be in number 3 now because Macon really jumped down.
Right.
But
Yeah.
1 penny tax millage rate is equivalent to about 1.1 million, Ms. Fox. So, a potential tax increase to cover these needs. And you're right, Chairman Latson, we don't want to burn out people and lose them to other counties, but just as important, we need to provide the best care and service for our children and needs and healthy well-being with the health department as we can. And if it requires a minor tax raise, a half a penny is
I think most people would be okay with that because we're supporting children and we're supporting the public in general. It was part of my campaign when I was campaigning, and I think Mark and Todd's as well, that we were going to do everything we could not to increase taxes.
right.
And we did a good job this year. We didn't increase taxes. And, so I just feel that we could provide better services by paying personnel better or increasing the number of personnel so we're not burning them out. That's my real concern, because I have family and many friends that work at DSS, and I've spoken with all of them, and I have family and friends that work at the health department, and I've spoken with all of them. My daughter works at the health department, so I know what their concerns are, and I talk to them, and like my daughter, she doesn't speak at the health department about it because it's like, well, if you want to know, ask him. So I'm not the go-between, and that's what I encourage everybody to do. If they have questions, call us. I mean, I'm sure Mark will take the calls. I'll take the calls.
Like you say though, even a half a penny, what's that, 650,000, right? I mean, that's a good chunk of change to.
Is there a way to do something along those lines and direct those funds at one department? Is that?
As a
that what we're
board, we
saying?
direct where we're going to spend those
Right.
money, whether we increase the budget of the health department or increase the budget of
Change the
DSS.
regulation of what the state says we're able to do
No,
in
it
that
it
department.
doesn't.
So,
Not-
in
As long as they're
theory,
under the state health, they have to stay within those brackets, and if we move this bracket, then the brackets underneath
we're also going to be adjusted.
are going to be adjusted, so it may
In
call.
order for us to get these people more money, we have to go down on these options.
Well, we can,
That's
we can
$1 million
increase,
question.
No.
yeah, we can increase this one, but it affects everybody down below. Whereas when it's under our system, we can increase that without affecting. Not saying that we wouldn't want to, but I'm just saying it didn't have to, but under the state regulations, it would have a trickle-down effect to all the other positions.
Have we made your job hard enough today? In terms of what we legally could do and legally could not do?
Are you asking Deborah a question?
Yes.
Hey, Deborah, I think that was directed to you.
It was, and I was talking and had it still on mute. So where I am, it's raining, and I have it on mute so that you don't hear the rain on the roof. You've had a great discussion. There are so many issues. I think, if you want me to research more legally a particular one and how it would, somebody needs to give me the green light when you're ready, but I don't want to, spend time, your money, doing research in a avenue you're not interested in.
Right. So, oh man, how do we comprise all of this into a question that can be researched?
So what is the question? I mean, what are we trying to find out?
I think my first question is, would an increase in millage rate be able to be directed at a location that we can, without affecting others?
So I can answer you. You can increase millage rate to increase your revenues, but Commissioner Smith was correct in a sense. Ultimately, you can't, you just have to raise, if you're gonna raise salaries, you just raise salaries and you raise revenues to help offset that. But the reality is you can't take, I don't think you can take a half cent and say that's permanently dedicated to these salaries. That's not how it works. So I think unless somebody wants to come in and correct, I've been around long enough to tell you that all you're doing is increasing revenues to help offset a cost, but you can't limit future boards to, they can raise salaries, lower salaries, they can raise taxes, they can lower taxes. There's only so many ways that you can actually dedicate a tax for a purpose, i.e. the bond for the schools. Or excuse me, not the bond for the pool.
My point was that we had.
Yeah, I agree that Don is right in what he said.
Yeah.
My point was that we have more flexibility in how we target salaries, not necessarily how we get the money to do that, but we have more flexibility in how we target increases in particular positions under the county system than we do the state system. Because the state system causes the trickle down effect into other positions. That's.
Yes, and so what I want to do is just to cover this so that everybody, because we're going to have a lot of folks potentially watching this and picking these conversations apart. That's the reason I've left it on what is substantially equivalent county personnel system. So this is accomplished, okay, counties can remove social service public health employees from certain aspects of the SHRA coverage without creating a CHSA. This is accomplished by applying for and receiving a substantially equivalent exemption from the Office of State Human Resources. The SHRA allows the State Human Resources Commission, acting through the acronym, to determine whether the particular elements of a county's personnel management system are substantially equivalent. Counties can petition for this designation in 5 aspects of personnel management: recruitment, selection, advancement, classification, and compensation, training, employee relations, political activity. If the county's petition is approved, the county employees who are subject to the State Human Resources Act, like public health and social services, become subject to county personnel system or exempt from the state with respect to the aspect. So what's not known is whether or not can we remove ourselves completely from the compensation. How would that happen? And then how would that be considered substantially equivalent to the state? And that's for me is the unknown. And then also it goes into a little bit more. I'm not going to read all this about how that basically equivalent personnel exemption regardless of, however, this is unlike personnel option. The substantial equivalent designation is not a blanket exemption for all aspects. So just read through this. What it can do is it does require annual maintenance on this. I want to point to that because I think this is going to come back to you about.
This seems like it would create more of a headache for HR and finance every time that we wanted to modify or we needed to modify for a given situation, certain salary
Or classification?
or classification. Because then it would, does that trigger another review, or can that review wait until the yearly review? And if it's not approved on the yearly review, then we tell that person we're cutting their salary because we didn't pass it. It just complicates things, whereas pulling them under the county, this seems like a much simpler thing to manage.
And remember, nothing is, I mean, that's why you're having your public hearing. That's why you've brought this up for general discussions. I do think Commissioner Jones had asked, is there a particular one you all are leaning toward or not? And I think you need to be, you may or may not be in a position to state all of that, but that's at this point.
My position has always been that we would become the consolidated board and hire a director and appoint an advisory council. That's always been my position. That seems like the most sensible solution.
I'm kind of left with option 3 and option 2, where we create a consolidated human services board and human services agency, and that board reports to us. But I mean, I feel like we're taking the 2 boards, we're creating a new platform for them to reach us more directly. So if there is a place where they see a direct need, we can then facilitate that.
And I go back to what Don explained about the previous attempt. Once that board was created, they wouldn't move forward on anything. So then you're left with, okay, we've done this, now what can we do? Nothing, because the board won't move forward.
Right.
That kind of leaves me with option 3, just because we don't know how people's attitudes and opinions and egos are going to play into this.
Well, I mean, I think I guess my question is, how many people are on the board that were on the board last time? And that's what I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what they're, what people's
What the
opinions and
makeup.
egos and, attitudes, about the whole thing. It's, and then we couldn't get anybody to agree.
Yeah.
It's just too big. So, that leaves me with option 3.
Well, if 3 and 2 are the 2 that we're gonna kind of focus on other than nothing, then that gives some people some, at least some options to look at and discuss what pros and cons of those would be in our public hearing. So,
Well, hopefully we've given them enough information to know where we're standing. So,
again, no one is losing their jobs.
yes, absolutely. That's,
And if we can put that in caps, it would be huge. If anything, we're trying to get more resources for these boards or for these departments and employees. Because there is a severe need. 87 children in foster care is a severe need. And VIA, if you can build us a place, that would be huge too. Love to have a facility with beds.
It'd be interesting to know, is that 87 youth going to potentially increase? Could it potentially decrease? What could be a projection?
That really, I mean, having been in that for 20+ years because of my wife, that really fluctuates with the economy. And the season. You have more kids as it, if the economy's bad and as you come to, say, Christmas, and people are stressing because they don't know if they're gonna be able to afford anything for, stress a lot of times comes out in abuse, and that's just a fact of life. And I mean, it shouldn't, 100%, but it happens. As the economy goes down, you have more drug users, which oftentimes leads to abuse of children. So it all fluctuates with the season and the economy. And economy is right now. So is it going to go up or down? I don't know. If it goes down, we'll probably see more.
Any further discussion on human services consolidation? Anything for other, or?
I do have under one other, just for the board's information, of course, you've read in the newspaper in regards to the license plate agency. I don't know if you saw the article on the, for bid, and so just letting the board know what the county's doing, what the tax office is doing is, currently, we have not come to you for us to submit a bid. I think we'd all agree that we want to maintain a license plate operation in Jackson County, okay? So what I'm trying to do is cover all bases in these conversations. Last heard, I'd actually had brought in our economic developer, Ms. Henry, in on this to make sure that we're trying to get the word out that that opportunity is available for private businesses. We believe that there are some people interested and they are going to attempt to apply and achieve to apply by the, whatever that September deadline is. But just understand that agency has certain criteria and certain requirements. Not everybody can apply and actually be approved to do that. So even though there's multiple people interested, they still got to go through and get vetted. And I really hope the best for them. And I want to keep an agency here myself. Now, having said that, I'm also having conversations with Tabitha, with Ms. Ash, our tax administrator. She actually brought this up. And instead of us just waiting for us to do our own research, we are doing internal research about what it would take for the county to provide this service. But what we're trying to do is stay out of the way of the private market. You know, the private market, if there's people out there that can apply and achieve and make a living off of this, great. But if not, then what we're doing is we're preparing ourselves to have a conversation with the board if there's just not interest and or there's not people out there qualified to provide the service. And I mention that to you now because, again, I hope somebody applies, it gets approved, and by October rolls around, they start the transition plan. Of course, I believe it's December when it closes, and there's a transition plan. If it doesn't happen, and maybe in October, I may or may not know at that point. But we may come back and have conversations with you, the county, we meaning Ms. Ash and so forth, just to let you know what it would look like from our end. Because what we're trying to, I just want to, weeks are going to matter in this conversation. And so I'm trying to avoid a gap in service. Now, we may not be able to avoid that gap in service, but what we're doing as staff is not just waiting. We're trying to do our own research and just letting everybody know. And I hope the private world is successful and they come out and we have a great license plate agency in the future. But if not, then you'll see if that place closed, you will be getting phone calls about what are you doing about the license plate agency, and staff is trying to be proactive in these conversations.
Do we know what actual date is that the bids have to be in by, and does that affect us submitting a bid, or?
Well, I'm not planning on doing the September one. It would be the October one. Right now, my understanding is there's some interest. I can't remember it's a 20-something. I can't remember the exact date. Wasn't planning on coming to you right now. I've got it tentatively on the October work session, and then if the state is communicating with us about whether or not they get applications and so forth, and if we just don't get qualified people, then we'll have this full conversation in October. And because what'll happen is they don't get applications, they may have to redo the advertising, and the way it works too, they may vet it and it may take 3 weeks to vet it. And then they may not come up with an applicant and then they have to re-advertise. So what I can't guarantee is hopefully there's no gap in service, but we're kind of at the mercy of the state's process too. So, and they have to go through this full process. So, I'm trying not to step in front of private businesses.
So would we do that in one of our current facilities, or would we?
That's what we would. I'm vetting all the costs so that.
That building is going away with the 107.
Yeah. So what would be brought to you is I'm not in a position now to talk about, we're talking about identifying space, people, revenues, all of that, so that we can tell you what it would look like for us. But I'm not in a position to, I'm just trying to let you know that staff is not sitting back. We're trying to be proactive, but also work and allow for private business to hopefully take on this needed service in our community. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I would like to recognize leadership cashers. They're down here today. They've been touring the facilities. Drove all the way down. Had a good time. Met with the sheriff. Got to see the MRAT. Tour the jail a little bit. So thank you guys for coming down. We do have a need to go into closed session today. So if there's the need is General Statute 143-38.11A3 legal and A6 personnel. And if there's a motion to go into closed session.
Move to go into closed session?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna get a picture.
Now, do you want to break or do anything before you go into closed session?
I was gonna say, let's take about a 10-minute break after we.
All right, so if y'all want to redo that, you can break and then, because
Yeah.
once you go into closed session, everybody's got to leave.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do our 10-minute break. Is there a motion for a 10-minute recess?
So moved.
A second.
Thank you for having us.
from recess. We do have a need for closed session today. General Statute 143-318.11A3 legal and A6 personnel. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We're now in closed session. And there was no action taken. Is there a motion for adjournment? Okay. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And none opposed. We are adjourned.